Hi, and thanks for watching another instructional video for CSCI 1300. In this video, we're going to be talking about how to remove an element from an array, whether it is sorted or unsorted. So let's talk about an unordered array or an unsorted array, which means that we have a jumble of elements and there's no particular order to what we have stored. They were filled randomly and there is no relation to how they are filled. And say we want to delete at a position. So what we can do is if we have an array, we're going to call the A array the unordered array. We have a second array called B, which will be our ordered array, which we're going to get to here in a second. But let's just talk about A for a second. So A has a series of unordered elements, and we're considering an open element here to be 0. So if we have something here that does not have a value larger than 0, we're considering it to be an empty location. So we're going to ask for a position to remove an element from. So we could remove any of the elements here that are listed. And we can do that through a process of the following. To remove an element from an unsorted array, we will have to overwrite the element at the index and swap it with the last element in the array. So that's what we're doing here. We're saying that at whatever position we decide to choose, which is the pause variable, we're going to take that value at that location in A and swap it with whatever value is at the end of the array in the last index, one less than the size. So if we had 6 elements, then size minus A would be 5. So it's the last index that we have that we can possibly access. So once we switch these numbers, what is going to happen next is we're going to reduce the size of the array by 1, so that the element that we moved to this size minus 1 position is actually removed from the size being decreased. So to recap, we take an element at a particular location, move it to the end position of the array, and then decrease the number of containers or the number of indexes in the array by 1 so that we will not access it anymore. Let's go ahead and look at what happens in the code when we look at the array before and after we delete an element. So if I look here at A, say I want to delete the 7 in A, which would be at index 1. So what we're going to do is we're going to swap 7 with 0 and then reduce by 1. So the last number should then be 2 as a result of that. So let's do that. We've got 5, 7, 10, 13, 2. And you can see here that the 0 took the place of the 7. And the last element is now 2 instead of 0. So we swapped those elements and we reduced the size of the number of index positions, or the size of the container of A. So let's talk about how to do the same thing, but if we have a series of ordered elements. And by ordered, I mean that there is some relation. They have an ascending, a descending order, or some other type of relation to them that makes them ordered. We're still considering 0 to be a blank entry. And so with that, let's look at what we would do in the B array if we were working with a sorted array. So when we do this, we'll actually have to use a loop. Notice that previously we could just switch the elements and then reduce the size without using a loop. But in this example, if we have an ordered array, we're going to have to do some shifting in order to keep things in their sorted order. So the first thing that we will do is we'll ask for a position again. And depending on what that position is, what we will do is we will use a loop to start I at 1 more than the position that we want to delete. And what we will do is we will shift everything up to the end of the array as long as we haven't reached the size of the array. And as we do that, we're going to be basically taking what is at the index before what we are looking at and shifting it to the index where we are looking at. So the previous element becomes the current element as we go along until we reach 1 less than size. After this has been done, what we do is we reduce the size by 1 so that the last element at the end is deleted. So let's look at this. Say we run the code. Let's talk about what we have here. So in B, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and a 0 on the end. So if I was to do a index value of 2, we would be looking at the 3 being changed. And what we can see here is that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 0. So what we do here is we go to position +1, so we go to the 4, we shift everything up, and then we delete. So what happens here is that the 3 gets moved to the end, and then we delete that by reducing the size by 1. So basically the element that we're looking for gets shifted all the way up to the end, and then we reduce the size by 1 so that we can no longer access that element at that location. That's all for now on removing elements from an array. Thanks and happy coding!